Well, there's a lot to learn about watercolor, and but I'm gonna try to
MCC.
do it quickly. And I made you a handout that just kind of talks about types of paper. So cold press paper is what I work on. It's more controllable. It goes anywhere from 80 pounds, and that doesn't mean the pounds that it weighs. It's the tightness of the weave and of the cotton that it's made from. And so it goes from 80 pounds all the way up to 400 pounds. And I use 140 pounds, which is right in the middle. A cold press paper, like I said, is very absorbent, where a hot press paper, if you ever got it, your paints like to dance. So if you just want to watch them evolve and then be like, oh, wow, look at that, it kind of looks like or whatever, more abstract work, then a hot press paper would be good because it has a more slick surface. So that allows the watercolor to do its own thing. The 400 pound is stay put. So the more absorbent, the higher the number. The less absorbent, the lower the number of the paper. Okay? Brushes, all you really need is a small, medium, and large, and we're talking about the tip. So here I have a small, medium, and large. And that's for the size area that you're working in. And should you use a large brush or a flat brush? They say a round brush is good for watercolor. I use both. A round brush kind of holds more water, so it's like a mop in that way. As far as paints, cakes versus tubes, you can buy tubes of watercolor. This is $8.99 for a tube. It's kind of more pricey. It's very, very concentrated. You only need like a half of a pea size to, so this lasts a long time. But so do cakes. Cakes last a long time. Here's an example of one of my well-loved watercolors, and I like to use Prang brand, P-R-A-N-G. It's a real intense color. I don't use like Crayola or anything like that. There just is not enough pigment in the paint. But this is really nice, and one thing nice about the Prang paints is that you can pop out a single color and just order a green from like Amazon or Dick Blick. So that's kind of nice. You can just replace the colors that you need. And for some reason, I use a lot of yellow, green, and blue. So I always, before I knew they popped out, I went through a lot of watercolor little kits. And then when I realized what they really did, then I just bought green, yellow, and blue little round ovals.
Deb, with you talking about paint, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In watercolor, what's the difference between regular watercolor paint and gouache paint?
Gouache is, it's not as transparent, it's opaque. So, meaning you can't see through it, and it doesn't have that veil of paint look. And it is water-based, so it's like a cross between an acrylic and a watercolor.
Can you use the two together well?
Yeah. You can use any mediums mixed, so then you'd have a mixed media painting.
But you can use the gouache with the regular watercolor without a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and anytime you guys have questions like that, feel free to ask me, okay? Techniques. I have a sheet that I had done for a class years ago where I have these techniques on here. And so I just wrote them all down. There's masking, saran wrap, bleeding, salt, scarring, flicking, sponge, lifting, alcohol, and scrumble as my techniques. Some of those names I kind of made up, but before I started teaching at MCC, I had never had a watercolor class, and I knew I was going to have to teach watercolor, so I did watercolor all summer long and discovered a lot of things by making a lot of mistakes. And I also came up with different techniques. Oh, if I do this, then I can help myself here, or I can have this look. So anyway, with masking, anytime that you do a watercolor after you draw it out, the first thing that you think of is saving the whites. Because once you cover up the paper, it's hard to get it back to pure white. You can lighten the color by lifting an area, but it doesn't get you down to the white of the paper. So you want to mask out the areas. If any of you use Photoshop or Illustrator on a computer, there's a masking tool on there, and that helps you preserve an area, right? Mask it out. So that's what we have, and I have masking fluid or frisket that I use, and you want to use an old brush to put this on with because it'll ruin your bristles of your brush. So just use an old brush and you can put it on there, you let it dry, and it's like rubber cement. You can float the color right over the top after it dries, and then after the watercolor's dry, you just roll it off, okay? So that's that. And I like the frisket because it's kind of tinted, and I can see it a little better, where masking fluid is real white, and it's harder to see when I have it on there. Saran wrap, when your paper's wet, you can take saran wrap and push it onto the area that you want it to have that look, which is kind of like maybe leaves on a tree would look good with that. So anyway, you just push it on the wet paint, let it dry, and then lift it up, and that's what you get. And then alcohol subtracts color. Make sure if you use rubbing alcohol, I use a Q-tip, but just make sure if you're using a brush that you rinse it really, really good, because you can keep subtracting color throughout your painting, which I've done. Salt looks really good for sand or frost, like if you wanted to do a winter scene. And it does have that grainy look, so you sprinkle it on wet watercolor, and it has that little starburst granule look. Scarring, I just use a simple paper clip. I don't know where I put mine, but a paper clip, and you just put the watercolor down, and then you scratch into it. It makes really good grasses. And the watercolor goes down into the grooves of the scarring, and it appears darker. Bleeding is good to know because in the sky or here in the water, you can see the bleeding that's happening. So that happens by having two wet colors touch, and they bleed together, or they soften together at their edges. And lifting, it's good to know about lifting, because if you ever want to lighten a color, or if you want to just paint your sky and then quickly lift out the clouds, that's good to use, and I use a cotton ball for that, or you could use a paper towel if you want to get a little harder. And it can be a damp cotton ball, and I could even do it right now on this wet one. I could lift out color, and I could probably do it right here. So you can see how it's maybe lifted. The color's lifted right there, see it? This was all dark, and I'm just kind of lifting out the color. And the more I do it, the more color that comes out. Some color, or some paints are staining pigments, so they might stain your paper, so you can't get it all the way down to the white, but at least you can lighten that area if you want. Flicking, I just use an old toothbrush, get real soupy watercolor. I hold my picture upright, because if you don't, the watercolor is apt to drip on your painting. So if you hold it up, then you can just take it and pull the bristles back and let it rip. So that's kind of fun, like in the sky if you want to put snow, or if you want to, if you have some flowers and you just want to put a little spray of color behind it, it kind of looks nice. Sponging, I use a sea sponge. This is nice for treetops and trees, so you can see that. And scrumble is a dry brush, so that means not a lot of water in your watercolor brush, and you're laying it on its side and just letting it hit the texture of the paper real lightly. So that would look good on the side of like a mountain or something. So those are the of different techniques, and I listed those for you. And anytime when you're done, if you want to take a picture of this chart, you could go home and try these techniques. And if you don't want to mask, you don't have masking fluid, just avoid those white areas, right? Or you could always go back with some acrylic paint and paint over it, like I did here, because I didn't mask out those areas. I just used acrylic paint to make those flowers in the field. All right, so what else would you have? Wet on wet. A wet on wet technique is when you put water down, and then you touch the watercolor on the water, and it just kind of dances out, you know, it just kind of goes out. And I'll show you that when we go to paint. Wet on dry, that's where I have real tight, precise areas that I don't want it to dance. I want it to just stay where it's at, and I did that with the trees. I did wet on dry. Always draw lightly, because once you put paint over the top of a pencil line, you can't erase it. Okay, it's locked behind the paint. So I always say draw lightly, and then if you need to, a kneaded eraser is really good for just lifting out the lead and making it lighter and lighter. And a kneaded eraser is found in it's $1.99, and it stretches, and it's a good little handy thing to have. And it doesn't leave any color or residue on your paper. That's why I like it. Watercolor dries 40% lighter, so that's why I like an intense pigment, because I want it to, you know, I know it's going to dry lighter, so I get a more powerful color. Always remember to save the lights, jump around the page. When I say that, it's because like I would paint the sky, then I would jump down here and paint the water, kind of leave the middle. And that way these two don't bleed together, okay? You gotta allow things to dry. Sometimes I have a couple watercolors going at once, just so I can force myself to not mess with it, because you kind of want to. A good beginning book is this one right here. I refer to this with all my beginning classes. It's called 30-Minute Landscapes, and I wrote the author's name down in case you ever want to get it. It works really good. It has different times of year, different scenes, and tells you how to do it. So it's really a nice book. Tools. I got them all listed there of everything I use when I watercolor. And the reason I would use painter's tape is if I want to have a white edge around my painting. I can paint right over, you know what painter's tape is when you paint a wall. It kind of protects things, so I can mask out my outside edge. Okay, so that explains that. So I will go ahead and, oh, and I have a spray bottle. I didn't write that on the list, so if you want to write it on the list, you can. So I want to get my paints all wet, and I don't want them to get the colors mixed up, so a spray bottle works really well. This acts as your paint palette to mix colors in, and I don't usually clean this up unless I need a spot, only because this is good color, and you'd just be putting it down the drain, right? Because you can just re-wet, and you got color again. There, I've got color on both sides. All right, so something about composition when you go to draw a landscape is you don't want to put your horizon line right in the middle of the page. It doesn't make it as interesting. So if you can put the line above or below the middle, that is always better as far as pleasing. So I put mine just slightly below the horizon line on this one, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint it so that you can see how I do it. I guess that's the best way, right? So I got all my colors wet. I've got wet on wet. I wanted to try this. I haven't gotten these tubes out in a long time, and I just wanted to try some of this magenta. And every time you do a watercolor, if you did the same watercolor over and over, it would look different every time. So it's not going to look just like this one, because I might vary my colors a little bit.
Can we pass that around, Deb?
Yeah. Okay. And those are 3 different ones. All right, so what I'm gonna do is a wet on wet technique. And so I'm gonna take my big brush and I'm gonna put the sky in, and if there is a sun, a sun, I'm gonna go around the area where the sun is. And I would have to look across my paper to see where the water is, right? So then I can put in my sky. I don't remember what I did for sky, but I'll just wing it. So I'm gonna use some blue. And you can kind of see how the edges kind of bleed. So it has that little spidery look. See how it's going down? It's kind of fun, right? Kind of spidering down the page and bleeding. And if I don't like something, I can use just a wet brush and go between the light and the color. And that just softens that so you don't have that spidering if you didn't like it. If I want to tap in another color, I could go and get that pretty magenta, because we know on a sunset we have all sorts of colors, right? So now I could just tap in some color. See how it's spidering around, and that's because of the wet on wet. It's wet watercolor on wet paper. And then maybe I want to put a little yellow down at the bottom. Now we know that yellow and purple make gray, so I might not want to mix those together. It's always good to have a couple cups of water just to keep your water clean. So it's not spidering in that white area because it's a dry area. And now I can go between the purple and the white, or the yellow. And it looks like some of my pigment right here did not melt in the paint palette from the tube paint. So I'm gonna kind of loosen that up a little bit. And I can use what's on my brush right here if I want to make a cloud. Clouds appear purple sometimes, right? You've probably seen dark clouds at night. That's kind of spidering up and down because of the wet, and I kind of like that, so I'm just going to leave that alone. Okay, so now I'm going to jump down and I'm going to do my, I forget that you can see it up here, so it's hard to see it's so bright, right? So hopefully it's a little more intense here on my paper in front of me. Okay, so I am going ahead and wetting the water end of this painting. And I'm just going to put in some purple down here. See, once again, we've got some spidering going. It's pretty fun, right? You can see it creeping down. I know I'm gonna put some trees in there, and so maybe I want a little bit of a reflection from the trees. So, and this right here is spidering, and I can kinda tip my paper, see how I'm doing that? It's creeping up, it's just kinda cool. And then I can put darker where the reflection is, and I can even put a little darker. Now you can use watercolor a little thicker too, so if you're used to working with acrylics, you might start out that way. I know I started out that way, using it a little thicker because you're not used to using something so loose. So I did that, and then I gradually got looser. So I guess it's just one of those things. So that's, I just kind of wiggled my brush, tapped it in, and I can use a smaller brush for this too. You can put in just some suggestions of some trees, just by wiggling my brush. See, I can put in some reflections of maybe some pine trees. Got lots of pine trees in Michigan. Maybe that's what will be at the horizon, is some trees.
So Debbie, when you get started, do you have a plan, or are you just?
I like to have a plan. You know, a photograph that I took, or I could just make something up, but I kind of draw it out, and, you know, so I have like a map. And sometimes you end up adding or not using some of the things that you have on your map. You know, maybe it's like, oh, I don't think I'm going to put that tree there, you know. So but it's good to have a direction, right? Okay, so there's that, and watercolor dries pretty fast. This is almost dry up here, so I'm not afraid really to put my trees in. And I'm going to use a little bit thicker paint for that, so it can be really opaque. And I can put in my trees, and I can just, I just kind of put the tip up here, and I just kind of wiggle it to make my trees. So you can just wiggle your brush, and then you have like a little pine tree. Can you see that? Happy little trees.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
By doing the reflections first.
We all know who said that.
Instead of trying to do it backwards.
So you can kind of do that all the way across. You could have, maybe there's an oak tree in there, so maybe you want to put that in. It's a little spooky, right? Kind of fun. Some more. And maybe there's some bushes, so maybe you want to get your medium brush out. I never throw brushes away. Sometimes my most loved and used brush is really good for frayed out ends of bushes. It along the edge. And like I said, I used a 140-pound cold press, and it says it right on the on the tablet, 140 pound. And right here it says cold press. Okay? And if you went to order it, it would give you those options and then you can get what you want. Maybe you want to do more abstract and then you would get a hot press probably, just so that it has more dancing power. There's that. And you could go down into the water a little bit with the reflection. You gotta kinda think ahead before you do things, and because if you don't want it to have a dry area, then you need to work quickly, right? But don't be afraid of it. I never get attached to what I do. I look at everything as an experiment. If I like it, I'll give it to a friend or frame it or give it as a gift or keep it. But that way I don't have any kind of disappointment. But I learn from it, right? I learn from, my mistakes have been my most valuable lessons because, and it's like, oh, I guess I can't do that. Or, that wasn't a good move. So there's kind of one little landscape.
That's amazing.
That would have taken me 2 or 3 days to do.
So let's do another one. I think I have another piece of paper, yep. So the next one I had drawn out was this one with a kind of field right here. So I will do wet on wet. So I have my horizon line a little lower than my middle.
And Penny, I noticed that you're using water that looks almost black now, but it doesn't show up as black on the paper. So, yeah, how often do you change your water and stuff?
You should, so it's not murky and muddying up your light colors. And I like to work light to dark.
Okay.
So that way if there's any kind of residue in your brush, those darker colors will drown it out. Thanks for coming in. Okay. So I do wet on wet. And then I am noticing that I have orange at the horizon. I did not save my white I put water all over it, but it'll be okay because I'm just avoiding that white area. And then I can grab a little yellow above it. Probably should put the yellow on first, but that's okay. And right above that. Tap in color, like that. If I feel like it's not intense enough, I can tap in a little more color and it can spread out. And then I can add some blues at the top. And the sides. And I want the two to merge, so I'm just rinsing my brush, dabbing it on my napkin a little bit so it's not dripping wet, but I want it to be real moist, and I'm just gonna go between the two colors to help merge them together. And then I can kind of force it a little bit. And if I want to pull out some clouds, I can get my cotton ball wet and I can lift out some clouds. See how it lifted out that color? And it gives the cloud a soft edge. So that's why I don't mask out my cloud. I just pull it out. Because because I want it to have a soft edge. If you masked it out, you would have a hard edge. So what I mask out usually is like ripples in waves in water, is something I would mask out. But you can see how it goes right down to the, pretty much the white of the paper. I can lift it out. And that's good to know, because if ever you feel like, oh shoot, then you can just go like this and kind of lift out the color, right? Alright. So now I'm going to go to my water, and I'm going to put in the yellow down here. Whoops, I want to do what I'm wet. Now, if you were taking a class in watercolor, you would not be flying through it like this, and you'd be going along with me, so. So I put in my yellow. I could put in a little bit of that orange if I wanted, which I didn't do in the top one, but I'm going to because it's up here. I want it to kind of echo down here. And I can just tap in a little water just to help move it. Okay, and then I'm going to put some blue at the very bottom. And then I'm going to rinse my brush, and with just a damp brush go between the two colors. And that helps it to blend together where they come together. Okay, and the yellow is dry. I could put in the birds. So the birds, I've got black silhouettes of the birds, and I'm going to use a tiny brush. And a little suggestion of a bird could just be like a little mustache, right? And usually they have a friend. There's usually more than one, and that's not a very good bird, but, you know. So, then I would put in my wheat field that's there, and I'm going to get some brown, and I'm going to take it over here and swipe it on my palette. I want to make a gold color. So then I can take yellow with a touch of brown. This, and I'm using wet on dry here. And then, I'm not too worried if it's streaky because I'm going to be putting some brown wheat that's in the foreground in here. Now you could, if you want to, I'll do it both ways. I'll do it over here with scarring with my paper clip that I just found. And over here, I'll do it with just my brush work. So over here, I could just, oops, a little thick, bring it like this. And then you can see what it looks like when it's scarred in. So I'm just going different ways. And then I can also just take water and go over those scratches. I think you probably can see those scratches, right? just a brush, you could just take your little brush and put them in. Just by pushing and lifting with your brush. Push and lift. So you go from thick to thin, and it can go different ways. And you can go over your horizon line to show that it's in front of that horizon line. So maybe these are cattails even, right? Dried up cattails. If they are, you could even put the head, a little hot dog at the top. I used to think that growing up. We lived by a lot of swamps. Okay. And then it's purpley and darker right beside this, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in. So kind of a purpley color right here.
Are you working from a photo, Deb?
I'm looking at this. So I
Oh,
got
okay.
purpley black. It's not exactly like it, of course. But anyway, if there's something I don't like, I try to adjust it. Like right there, I didn't really like it. And so what I'm doing is I'm rinsing my brush, getting clean water on it, and I'm just gonna kind of, and I can always lift. To help myself. I feel like that watercolors are pretty forgiving. And then I can put in my trees, same way that I did before. So my brown might be a little wet, but that's okay. It's okay if it has like a little bit of a soft edge right there. That doesn't bother me. In fact, I kind of like it. So I feel like every watercolor is a discovery, you know? And they all evoke a different feeling. Just like when you look at a sunset, it evokes a different feeling when you look at it. We've had some really magnificent ones lately, haven't we? So you can put in your trees, however they might be. And I honestly didn't know if I was going to like watercolor when I first started working with it, because it was just like, I have this mess going on. But it's like, nope, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm not giving up on it. I really want to learn this, and how am I going to teach it if I don't know how to do it, right? So I was persistent. And, you know, that's how it is with anything you do, honestly, is if you really want to, you just practice and you just keep trying, right? I still can't do a cartwheel. But maybe it's because I don't practice. Okay. So you can just kind of, you know, put in your bushes or whatever you have. Back over here. And maybe it just kind of goes off more flat. And then if you didn't save your white and you wanted to, acrylic paint or gouache, like you had mentioned, gouache is more opaque. Any time I want to do a dot or perfect circle, I use the handle of my brush, so the handle is really valuable and useful. So then I can just put in my sun like that. I could also put it in my water. And I can kind of make it a little wavy, because if the water has any kind of movement, it probably would be a little wavy. And I know you can't see it real well, but it is right there. So, okay?
All right, so that might keep painting a little bit, but I wanted for her to share some of the other kinds of painting she does, because I have been a very happy purchaser of some of her pots and different things she does. So I wanted to show you some of her other things as well.
Well, I do flower pots. I like to paint on flower pots. Let me look in here. I do those wine and paint parties. Those are fun. I just did one it's called the Red Barn. It's in Lowell, and they make the painted turtle cider, hard cider. But anyway, and we did this painting for that, and this was in acrylic. I don't know if you can see it.
Cute.
So there's that painting, because they wanted a winter scene and they wanted a red barn. So there was that. And then I've been, like you said, painting on pots. So here's some of the pots.
Ooh, cute. What kind of paint do you use for that?
I use acrylic paint, and then so this was with the bead.
What kind of paint are you using on your pots?
Acrylic paint.
Acrylics?
And then once they dry, I put a clear coat. I brush a clear coat on it, and that way they're not, toxic, especially in the winter time.
And she has a great display of these
At Forest Hills Foods, it's in Ada. So this is a lakeshore scene. So you could put any kind of theme, that would go in your house, you could do. Here's a little Valentine one. It's kind of whimsical. It's kind of fun. You could get patriotic with it. You could do some Spanish. Whoops. Oh, yeah, that's a card. That was a card. So one of our coworkers was sick, and her name is Karen, and she's a cashier. So we all wanted her to know we were thinking about her, so we all made a card and signed it. Here's a watercolor house, and it says our first home. And realtors really like that idea. And then I like to paint on cups. So this is kind of a St. Patty's Day cup. And then there's another one. And you buy glass paint for that, and then you bake it in the oven, and it's dishwasher safe. I always say hand wash is recommended, because it depends on your detergent, if it's harsh or anything like that. But I've washed them in the dishwasher, I don't have a problem at all. Here's another one. Shenanigan coordinator. Gotta have one of those in every family, right? Oh, and I do cups, and then I do wine glasses. This was for someone who said that they like to sit around the fire pit, and they have 4 amigos. They call themselves the 4 amigos. So could you paint me a Mexican style one? So that's what I did. There's the four amigos on the other side. This is a card I made for someone with their dogs, and this is colored pencil. So it's raised up off the paper because the dogs are cut out after I draw them. They're cut out, and then I put like a foam sticky back to the card so that they look raised. Frogs, hedgehogs. This is all that glass paint that I was talking about. And the brand is Folk Art brand that I use. And you can get it at Michael's. And the Prang watercolors, you can't get them at Hobby Lobby because I stopped in before I came here just to see. So you can order them on Dick Lick, or if you're at Michael's, you can get them at Michael's, they do sell them there. Okay. And the colored pencils that I like to use is Prismacolor, because they're really rich and they're really waxy, and so they almost look like a painting when you use them, and especially with a lot of pressure, they look good.
So does anybody have questions from what Deb has shown, or just some general painting?
Question, you said with the glass paint and then you bake it, are you talking just in your oven or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, so I wait until I get enough to make a oven load, and then I just put them in the rack, and then I turn my oven on to gradually go up to 350, and then I leave it in there for a half hour, time it for a half hour, and then it gradually will cool down. So it's actually in there about an hour, but it goes through that warm up, cool down process that it needs to bake firmly and cure.
Did you paint a sunset? My English teacher said that there was somebody in here painting a sunset and I had to see it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't know if you did.
Yep, when we're done, you can come up and look and see what we did.
Any other questions? I know we're getting on towards the hour time, but thank you, Debbie.